okay for tomorrow for September the 1st.
Good. Hello, everybody. We know that folks are just getting in. Want to make sure that everybody is able to mute themselves if you're not already muted, just in case there's any feedback. This conversation today is an update. We know that a lot has transpired in the 1 year since the affirming ruling of federal funding being directed by virtue of the Constitution and the court. And since that time, Leandro is back in limbo. But it doesn't mean that there is not hope. It doesn't mean that there is not opportunity. And it doesn't mean that there's not a lot more that we can do as advocates in every child. I'm thrilled to be asked to help us in facilitation of today's conversation with all of our advocates. I want to thank each and every single one of you all for the work that you've been doing in every corner of this state to make sure that we are lifting up the right for equitable funding in public education. And for those of you that may be joining us for the first time, we would like to welcome you to this family, to this coalition of advocates for education, Every Child NC. We're a community-led statewide coalition of organizations, parents, teachers, and students who advocate for every child's constitutional right to a sound basic education. Our work focuses on promoting equity so that race, ethnicity, economic background, regional location, disability, gender identity, and sexual orientation, immigration status, and language are not barriers to education opportunities. And I have the pleasure of having a host of panelists with us. Before we get started, I want to turn it to Felipe and Christian to give us some interpretation guidelines.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. This is Felipe, one of your simultaneous interpreters today. I'm here to provide you with instructions on how to connect to interpretation. Hola a todos, buenas noches, buenas tardes. Yo soy Felipe, estoy aquí con mi colega Christian y vamos a ser sus intérpretes el día de hoy. Estas son las instrucciones sobre cómo conectarse. This message will be first conveyed in English and then in Spanish so that everyone is on the same page. If you're using a computer, you will find the interpretation option on the Zoom meeting control panel, usually located at the bottom of your screen. To select your language, simply click on the small world icon that says interpretation at the bottom of your screen and then select English. If you're using a phone or a tablet, please tap your screen and at the bottom right-hand side, you will see 3 dots that open more options. Press those 3 dots, then select language interpretation followed by English, and finally press the button that says done. And you will be ready to listen to the English interpretation during this meeting. Please remember that interpretation does not work on Chromebooks or if you called in. You must connect to Zoom through the app for it to work. Thank you, and please let us know in the chat if you have any difficulties. Ahora en español, si ustedes están utilizando un computador, encontrarán la opción de interpretación en los controles de la reunión de Zoom ubicados normalmente en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Primero, hagan clic en el icono de interpretación que aparece en forma de globo terráqueo que dice Interpretation o interpretación. Luego hagan clic en el idioma en el que deseen escuchar esta reunión, en este caso español. Si usted está utilizando un teléfono o una tablet, presione su pantalla y abajo a mano derecha verá 3 puntos que abren más opciones. Presione estos 3 puntos, luego seleccione Language Interpretation o interpretación de idiomas, que es lo mismo que traducción. Luego haga clic en español o Spanish. Y finalmente debe presionar el botón de Done o finalizado. Y con esto ya estará listo para escuchar la interpretación en español. Por favor, recuerden que la interpretación no funciona en los Chromebooks y tampoco funciona si llaman por teléfono para conectar. Deben conectarse a Zoom a través de la aplicación para que funcione la interpretación. Gracias. Cualquier pregunta que tengan, por favor, déjenos saber a los intérpretes en el chat. And with that, Sarah and Marcus, I'm ready to be assigned as interpreter. You may take it away. Thank you.
Felipe, thank you very much. Christian, thank you very much. And for all of our panelists, as we begin this conversation, let's be cognizant of the fact that we are trying to share this in a different language, and we want to make sure that we are speaking at a pace that allows them to do their job so that we can make sure we're broadcasting as clearly as possible. I'm really saying that for myself. Also, as we get started, I just want to thank each and every single one of the educators that are on the line today. I know how hard it took for us to get to this week. All summer long, we've been thinking about all the different things that could happen all the different things personally, and now to see us in the classroom, to see us leading in education right now in the midst of everything that's happening in our country. We owe you a debt of thanks. We owe you a debt of gratitude. And we owe you the right to give you an update right now for just a few minutes. We're not going to take a lot of your afternoon. We're going to try to wrap up by 7 o'clock so you'll have time for your other activities. But thank you. And just like all the other folks here, we see exactly what you're doing, and we're going to fight hard to make sure you get the funding that you need for our families, for our students, and for your profession. I'd also like to pause for one moment. Our state and this country have been gripped by issues of gun violence. Our schools have been prone on the K through 12 level to this violence. And now more recently in our own backyard at UNC Chapel Hill, we've seen the students, faculty, and staff there gripped with the realities during the first week of school of a mass shooter. Luckily, the students, the responsiveness of the faculty and staff, the number of individuals that could have been injured physically was diminished. But we know the physical toll, the families of the professor, and those that are impacted deeply by this is going to sting a lot longer than this week. So if we could please just take a moment of silence for those individuals and those families that were impacted by the shooting at UNC. All right, thank you very much. So I want to make sure as we go into our updates from our very astute group of panelists, and you all will not believe how amazing of a panel we have today. The individuals that are going to speak to you are on the front lines at every single level of this fight. And a year after the ruling of the formerly seated Supreme Court around the true funding for Leandro based on the constitutional amendment, hearing from these folks they're going to put us in the right positioning to make sure that we know how to fight moving forward. We have specific goals that we want to do. We want to accomplish rather throughout the afternoon while we're together for this hour. We want to make sure everyone understands the implications of this lack of funding of the plan since November 2022 and beyond. We want to condemn also the lack of a state budget. Not only do we not have the funding from this 30-year fight, plus we don't even have the funding this year by virtue of a past state budget. And every single year we're seeing delays in a state budget that has real impacts on how we can resource the classroom, how we can resource public education. We want to offer some guidance to advocates and an update on what to expect in the next phase of this case. And we're going to hear from leading advocates who can reiterate the harm that this is causing to our children and what's at stake if we don't keep pushing. A lot of times folks wonder, well, are we making any change? Why don't we just pack up? If we stop now, it'll be a lot harder to get back even to where we are today. And we're going to hear from individuals that can explain that in more detail. And most importantly, we're going to make sure everyone understands what we can do to strengthen the movement and continue to join in this fight. I'm going to go now to our main event. I want to start with our panelists. All of our panelists have been prepped to introduce themselves to you. And I'm going to go by the order in which you appear on the screen. And luckily, the first is our frontline leader and warrior introductions, Mr. Angus Thompson. Attorney Thompson, the floor is yours for introductions. You're muted, Brother Thompson.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
My name is Angus Thompson from Robeson County. I'm a retired public defender. I'm also an original Leandro plaintiff. The lawsuit was filed in 1994. And at the time I was a school board member, and I filed on behalf of myself, an individual, as well as my 7th grade daughter, who was in the public schools of Robeson County.
Let's do this, Mr. Thompson. Your microphone is a little bit further from your mouth. And so let's just probably move it one more a little closer and get one mic check from you. We're still not hearing you. As he is working on his sound, and we were able to hear a very little bit of your introduction, but it was coming in and out. So we'll give you a few minutes to work on your audio, and I'm going to toss it next to Susan Book.
Hello, I'm Susan Book. I am one of the co-founders of Save Our Schools North Carolina, a Facebook page that basically is parent-led about fully funding our public schools. I'm also the co-host of Advocacy Bites, which is a podcast that talks about how to be an everyday advocate and how you too can get involved. as a disability parent, I need to model how a person with a disability would introduce themselves, and that is physically. So for those of you who may have sight impairment, I am a petite, chubby, middle-aged white woman who wears glasses that match my short brown hair, and I'm wearing an orange shirt today. In the background, you might see a couch and a bookshelf, and on occasion, a very friendly beagle. So that is who I am. And I came into this work because of my son, who's a student with a disability, who was getting suspended quite a bit. And I made those connections between the disparities that were happening in his own school to the disparities that were happening in our state house.
Perfect, Susan. Let's try to get a mic check from you, Attorney Thompson.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, sir. And I tell you what, I don't want to rob you of an introduction. You go right ahead and you can start back over with your introduction.
Okay, again, my name is Angus Thompson. I'm from Robeson County. I'm a retired public defender. I'm also an original Leandro plaintiff. And my daughter, who just handed me my microphones, I'm in Maryland now, was also an original plaintiff, then in the 7th grade, and now at the University of Maryland as a human resource specialist. I was also on the school board at the time the Leandro suit was brought in 1994.
Thank you very much. And I think it's appropriate to go from the original plaintiffs to some of the hardest working attorneys that are currently working on the case today. I want to toss it to Attorney Hinojosa.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for inviting the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We represent the North Carolina, Charlotte-Mecklenburg branch of the State Conference of the NAACP in this case as interveners, and who have been interveners in this case since 2005, along with the Penn interveners. And I'm the director of the Educational Opportunities Project at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law and based out of DC. Thank you for having us.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. Nancy?
Hello, my name is Nancy Rogers. I am the project coordinator for BESIS, which is Building Equity in Early Childhood Systems for Nash and North Chescombe County. We focus on the inequities that exist in early childhood education. And we are firmly believers that we need to set the foundation early so that all of these inequities that are existing throughout the school systems can be minimized. And Mr. Frenchie Davis is my partner, and he was also going to speak.
You go right ahead, Frenchie. Yes, sir.
My name is Frenchie Davis. I am the CEO of Foundation Builders Academy Child Care Development Center and the BESIS project, Building Equity in Early Childhood Systems. I am a product of one of the poorest counties in North Carolina, Edgecombe County. And I opened up a center here in Edgecombe County because I was looking for high quality childcare for my son. And at that time, I didn't think that there was a high quality center in Edgecombe County. So I thought that I could fill the void and open up a high quality center in Edgecombe County, which is the community that I grew up in. And actually it's probably 2 miles from where I grew up. So I was really trying to just put back in the community. So that is me, Frenchie Davis.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the work that both of you all do. Now let's go to another hardworking leader of hate-free schools. Let's go to Leader Strong.
Hello, everyone. I'm Latondra Strong. I am the founder of Hate Free Schools Coalition. We work for diversity, equity, and inclusion across the state of North Carolina and in Virginia. We have seen firsthand the plight of underfunded schools. We've watched children suffer for not getting the resources and seeing the limited resources being hoarded by communities that don't look like us. So I'm very happy to be on this program and looking forward to talking more.
Thank you very much. Now, our very, very capable advocate in the Southeast Cumberland County, Mr. Sean McMillan.
I appreciate that intro, Marcus. This is Sean McMillan. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm from Cumberland County. I'm a native of Fayetteville, North Carolina. Bring to this experience, to this forum, some experience as a soldier, a retired soldier. Bring experience as a parent. Bring experience as a resident, longtime resident of one of the Leandro counties. And some experience as a teacher as well, as an educator who's seen frontline what this means to our children, what these resources mean for our teachers, our educators. And from that, I just bring a firm commitment to continuing this fight, and so much respect for people like Latondra, like Marcus, like Sarah, like Susan, who refuse to back down 1 inch and continue the fight for Leandro. And especially am inspired by neighbors like Angus, who lives about 30 minutes from me in a neighboring county. And so much respect for you for continuing this and continuing to fight for justice that's decades overdue. And just want to say we're with you all the way, and I'm very honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Last but not least, and I picked this person to go last, not just because of their driving, I want you to be safe, but also because of the spiritual grounding that I think all of this lies in. This is a battle that we are fighting, not just in the courts. We're fighting against individuals that don't mean us well, and there are spiritual implications to this in a context that we all must be aware of, regardless of our religious affiliation. So I would like to now introduce Reverend Paul Ford.
Blessings to you, brother. Thank you. I am on the move. Got a car full of teenage boys on our way to the opening night of Wake Forest football over in Winston-Salem. So looking forward to that. But, you know, I'm with A for E, Action for Equity, based out of Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. And we have been dedicated to this work of supporting the fight for Leandro, you know, ever since it kind of first came on our radar. With this organization that was birthed out of the Action for Ashley campaign to bring attention to the dilapidated conditions at a Title I school in East Winston, the Ashley Academy, that we are still working to kind of finish that campaign and get a new school built. This work is very close to my heart. My late mother was a public school teacher in the New York City public school system for over 35 years, taught every grade from 1st through 6th grade, served for a number of years as a school librarian, which is, of course, we are now seeing under assault in Texas and other places like that. So we have known for many, many years that the full resourcing of our public schools is central to the success of our children. And all of this work that I do is informed by my faith and an understanding that we must always work on behalf of those who are most vulnerable in our society and in our communities. And if that's not the children who hold the keys to the kingdom of heaven, I'm not sure who it is. So glad to be here.
Glad to have you too. Reverend Ford, thank you for doing what you're doing in the midst of being an example to us all about how to be actively involved. I know a lot of folks are multitasking. As you're watching this, feel free to do so, because we have to do it all. We have to juggle all of these things at one time simultaneously. And I appreciate that. We're going to come to you after we hear from David, because I really want us to get a sense of where the court case is now, where you know, there could be some potential traction or movement. What do we see down the pipe from a litigation standpoint? So first, David, if you could just ground us in what we can expect with the case and why it's so outrageous that this current North Carolina General Assembly is able to pick and choose which laws to follow still, despite all that we've seen. David?
Yeah, thanks so much, Marcus. So I do want to begin, and I'll be brief, of course, you know, but I do want to begin with a quote from that November 2022 hearing of the decision that was such a hard-fought, hard-won victory for the people of North Carolina. And it's especially important, you know, to remember what that language said. So it said, if this court is to fulfill its own constitutional obligations, it can no longer patiently wait for the day, year, or decade when the state gets around to acting on its constitutional duty to guard and maintain the constitutional rights of North Carolina school children. Further deference on our part would constitute complicity in the violation, which this court cannot accept. Indeed, ultimately, it is the state judiciary that has the responsibility to protect the state constitutional rights of the citizens, right? Very powerful language. And for those of us who are attorneys and have been doing this work for a number of years, I mean, the pronouncement by this court was incredibly far-reaching. They understood where the state had been and where the state could possibly head if the judiciary did not act. But yet we saw 3 months after this decision, motions filed by the state controller, motions filed by the legislative interveners to try and avoid their obligations. So they didn't file a motion to reconsider. Everybody, seems to think that they filed a motion to reconsider. They would have had to have filed that roughly around 30 days after the decision. They never did that. It wasn't filed. I think it was by mid-December that they had to file that. But they didn't. Instead, they filed these other motions that they essentially just made up out of thin air to try and do an end run of this incredible decision by the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, those motions, everybody thought that the Supreme Court was going to rubber stamp those in quick order. But I think that the Supreme Court is very troubled, perhaps even this Supreme Court that is very highly politicized, but they're struggling with how can they rationalize the law, the precedent in the state and grant their motions, which they may want to do, at least a majority of them may want to do that, but they still can't find themselves to find that legal rationale that they're all comfortable with. So those motions are still pending and the order is still in place. Meanwhile, the case was remanded to the trial court to try and figure out, okay, well, there was a budget passed last year. How much of that budget is applied? Of course, the legislative interveners tried to take credit for lots and lots of other funding obligations. The trial court, who was the third trial judge on this case in the last couple of years, another trial judge was reassigned by the chief judge to this case. And that judge also found that based on the evidence, the state still owed hundreds of thousands of dollars, including hundreds of thousands of dollars for this education of students in at-risk circumstances, including low-income students, students of color in high-need districts, as well as students with disabilities and students who are English learners. That, of course, the legislative interveners could not stop there and have now filed an appeal of that ruling. And of course, we already see the kind of documents they're trying to get in front of the court because they want to relitigate the issues that were already settled last November in 2022 by the Supreme Court. But I also want to just close with about how incredibly important this decision is and how we need to continue to try and enforce it and how important your advocacy efforts, because your advocacy efforts have not resolved all the issues, but it has made some ground in the millions of dollars that are still owed under the comprehensive remedial plan. But that's the affirmative action decision. The affirmative action decision by the Supreme Court, which was very disingenuous, and we litigated on behalf of student interveners that case with the North Carolina Justice Center, and I argued that case before the Supreme Court myself. And it's a terrible, terrible decision. But we see the UNC system's guidance, which the decision is bad. The guidance from the UNC system is terribly bad. And it threatens to take us back to another era when Black students, Native American students were excluded from the flagship but they were going to start trying to use, educational quality. So it's incredibly important, that the state come forward and meet its obligations to ensure all students have access to an excellent education so that they can make themselves competitive. And if they so choose to go to the most selective universities in the state of North Carolina. So thank you very much.
David, don't go off mute just yet, because you said something right there at the end that I want to make sure we don't miss. The General Assembly, who is responsible for ultimately following the mandates of the Constitution to fully fund Leandro, are also over control of the Board of Governors of the UNC system. And so you have a politicized UNC system in this moment, passing down guidance that is restrictive in nature in regards to this funding or this type of funding. And at the same time, this legislature, as they try to take control of the Board of Governors, they're also trying to take control of our judiciary. And the implications of them being able to rehear the state Supreme Court, that is, being able to even attempt to rehear this, is because there is new leadership in the Supreme Court, as opposed to the previous iteration of the Supreme Court that made this ruling in November. Can you talk a little bit? I know you're not, necessarily a North Carolina expert in constitutional law. I think you're an expert in my book, and there's maybe others in the panel that can talk about this, but talk about this kind of power grab, or this attempt to beat the process at the head by changing the makeup and control of these independent bodies.
Yeah, these are bookends of very fearful tactics on undermining equal opportunity in education, both through policy and the courts. And I think, it's a real concern that North Carolinians must have. I think that they must voice to make sure that that these systems in place do not further strangle, opportunity in the state of North Carolina. I mean, it's just so troubling. And I can't tell you, I come from Texas, right? That's where my roots are. And I came from one of the poorest school districts in the state of Texas, known as Edgewood ISD. And for years, we were fighting all of these politics, and finally had, some court victories, but it didn't resolve, everything. But it does take constant diligence, unfortunately, because we can't just trust them. But we still need to continue to highlight, the real concerns with this, because, they're at jeopardy of losing trust in the communities and trust in their own constitutional obligations that they have.
All right, Debbie, you got me shaking up here. I need a little bit more spirit. I'm going to go back to Reverend Ford, and I know you are in a process too of transitioning from your vehicle, and so I know you may have to leave us early, and if so, I want to get to you next, just to make sure, and kind of in this space of what David is talking about, where we have been in this, I won't say a year because it hasn't been quite a year yet, but since November to now, the implications, the shift of the makeup of the judiciary, the shifting of the stance or opinions of these different reports that are coming out around the guidance. This can be confusing, I think, to anyone, but more so to our advocate community. Our job, the 70 plus folks that are here, and I appreciate so much everybody introducing yourselves in the chat. Please shout out where you're from. I saw somebody from Calabash. That's a whole nother story. But tell us, Reverend Ford, what or why are advocates demanding Leandro funding from the beginning? And now in this moment, how are we engaging families and students in the fight with or how should we be engaging families and students in the fight, considering all these changes in the past just 10 months?
So the advocacy continues to be so important. The good news is, when I just consider the past few years, how much more of a mainstream thing in terms of the knowledge and awareness Leandro is. We see it constantly being referenced in newsletters that go out from one organization or another, even more mainstream organizations that weren't attuned to things of this nature. So there's a rising awareness of Leandro and what it is about and what it can do. One model that was done here in Forsyth County, where we're based out of, looked at what funding of Leandro would do over full funding of Leandro would do just for Forsyth County School over the next couple of years. And we're talking about tens of millions of dollars that could be provided to offer more supports for disadvantaged students, a couple $1 million for textbooks, $2.3 million for career to put in place plans for 7th and 10th grade students to have to adopt career development plans at risk of being held back if they don't. Well, we already know that so many of our schools are under-resourced as it is, short-staffed as it is. Who's going to do this? So then when you look at a provision like that, you know, that speaks to a real life situation. So every district and parents and families in every district need to be considering what's going on in their public schools right now, where the shortfalls are, what are the things that are not being provided for their children, for their students, that could be if there were more resources coming flush in, and then understand that you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that is due over a certain period of time if Leandro is fully funded. We have to keep on raising awareness. We have to make it so that this is a household thing, a kitchen table kind of issue, a kitchen table level of awareness in terms of what Leandro stands for, what it means, what it is, because we are facing a situation right now where a partisan majority is able to govern unilaterally because of this veto-proof majority that they have. And they have this majority on the state Supreme Court. And so it's no shock to any of us that some of these efforts that were detailed earlier by the gentleman are going on right now, which you're mentioning, brother, as well, because there has always been a resistance, right, to have any other body tell the legislature what to do. And really beyond that, as we see with the attempts to expand the voucher program in this state, there is just not a respect for public education. There is a notion that the money should follow the child, not necessarily follow the schools. But I've said for so many years, if you've got enough vouchers for every single child in every single Title I school, every single school that is not providing all the needs and the resources the way that they should be to get out, then go ahead and let's do it. But of course, nobody ever is proposing a program that has it, but it's not about taking care of our most vulnerable students. It's not about taking care of poor people and their children. It's always been about other interests that have nothing to do with that. And so we have to maintain the advocacy. We have to keep it up. It starts on that local level. We need to have an awareness of Leandro. We have a little website set up here in the county that we're redoing and updating a bit, Forsyth Leandro. We really want to see that in every county around the state, right? So that the awareness is wide and it's deep. And when we are looking towards upcoming elections and the issues that we need to be putting in front of voters and that we need to be putting in front of those who call themselves running for office to serve the people, Leandro needs to be a litmus test. Do you support the full funding of Leandro? There's only one right answer. The answer has to be yes. And that needs to be in every county across the state, from the largest to the smallest, from the poorest to the richest, okay? So that we have the type of support amongst those who are in a position of power to make this thing happen that we need.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Ford. I want to go now to Latondra. Please tell us, when we're hearing about exactly what Reverend Ford laid out, when we're thinking about the lack of resources, there are already systemic issues before we get to the lack of funding. Can you talk about how much more real these issues have come to light in 2023, some of the things that you're seeing around the work that you're fighting against the racist, and including the racist takeover of the school board in your very own backyard? Just give us a little context of what's really happening on the ground with our students and the issues they're facing.
Yeah, I would say for about 5 years, we had a pretty good run where diversity, equity, and inclusion were trending. and people were excited to have equity departments. They were excited to fund the equity work in our district. And of late, we have seen where there is actually funding against equity. It's no longer a positive thing to be inclusive and to have diverse experiences being in schools. So we see Proud Boys coming in our schools. We see Moms for Liberty expanding nationally. In fact, Good Morning America featured Moms for Liberty as an organization on Friday. And so those of us that are on the front lines that really felt like we were winning, we are seeing that these groups are organizing against our school.
Wait a minute. We got because I know we wrapped it, we close to time, but
on Friday, Good Morning America featured Moms for Liberty. And I was appalled because they made it seem like they were just a PTA that was fighting for access to education for all students, when we know that they are anti-Black, they are anti-genity, and all the other ways that they are restricting what's being taught in our schools. And so it's become, we see the flip side, the backlash. And because of that, right, it's almost like they have stalled for a year. And during these times, they're going to put all these systems in place where you'll have school boards that that even if the funding gets released, won't put the money into the programs that we know are going to benefit our students. We are under real threat. It is a real threat that we are losing our public schools. We're seeing vouchers money being shifted out of our schools. And so I really came today to hopefully energize folks to be very, very, very intentional and involved at your local level, because by the time the attorneys do their work and the judges do their work, the school boards are not going to be supportive of this work at the local level. And that's another way we're going to see our efforts being defeated.
You have the chat going on fire right now. And that's exactly what we need. This is a working space. This is a conversation. We need to be organizing in the chat, talking amongst ourselves, making this as dynamic as possible. I know we are strapped for time, so I'm going to move. But thank you so much for just that little bit of, because I didn't know. I had no idea. I knew that they were actively working last summer. And to think that, we still have not seen the true silent majority of mothers and family members and individuals pushing in the schools in that moment, because number one, these are artificially intelligent folks coming into these school board meetings. And so, I'm just hoping to see one day, we can push, every child can push to make sure that we're going in to these school board meetings. And we've done it in Wake County before. We've done it in other parts of the state. They've signed off on our resolution. We can put boots on the ground in the school board meetings this year. All right, now let's go to Nancy and Frenchie. I want you to talk about, we talked about K through 12 education. Can you talk about the state of early education funding and the hardships created for families and providers? And especially if you have seen any, has there been any hindrance of your funding that you would have received because of the lack of approval of a state budget?
Oh, yes. In the early ed, with the lack of the funding that we're receiving, it's hard to get quality teachers and get the support that the teachers that we do have and the resources they need to effectively teach the children that we have. We have some of the children come in with that the ACEs, and it's coming into the classrooms, and in order to effectively teach the children, some of the teachers need help in the classroom, because they got classroom of 8 to 10 children and one teacher, and you have 1 or 2 students that takes all of the teacher's time because of certain challenges that the child have, and the resources that we need to help fund quality, high quality educators. we're not getting the resources, and our children are getting behind because of the quality and the affordability of childcare as well. Because of some of the families, like I said, I'm in Edgecombe County, one of the poorest counties, and the children are born to low poverty, and health. We need to focus on health programs to help families, and preparing, try to get funds to prepare for when they become older as well.
Nancy, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, so I want to give you guys some numbers to let you see the impact of some of these things. So we know that the public investments in childcare and early learning, state and local, need to invest more than 1%. In early childhood, we get a lot of 1% of the budget in order to increase compensation for early childhood teachers, scaling up funding for Smart Start, expanding access to NC Pre-K so more minority and poverty-stricken 4-year-old children can participate. But these are some of the numbers that are really staggering, that by releasing the funds of Leandro, it would be helpful, because it would provide staff that would be able to deal with some of these issues, other than the overworked teachers already that are getting minimum wages to educate our children, because it's no longer, childcare is no longer viewed and perceived as glorified babysitting. These are educators that have to have credentials to go into these classrooms and be able to make a livable wage. So in Nash and Edgecombe counties, we have 15,285 children. 32% of these children are currently living in poverty level. 40% of the early childhood workforce live at the poverty level, and 40% expulsion rate amongst 1 to 4 years of age of Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous children. So you tell me.
Mic drop moment, to say the least, Nancy. I thank you for dropping those numbers in, because I think that's very important. It helps continue to set the context. So we have 3 more individuals, and I think we really wanted to make sure that these 3 individuals get a chance to really ground us in their issue area, but then the hope, right? The bright hope. As a matter of fact, Susan, I want to turn to you now. What does Leandro funding do, or what will it do for students with disabilities, and to address, please, also any other disparities with discipline, racial disparities included?
Sure. One of the reasons I love talking about Leandro is because every single bit of Leandro, almost every single bit, touches the lives of children with disabilities. And we can start with early ed, because when we have high quality early ed educators, these are our watchdogs. These are the folks who are saying, I'm seeing a disparity. Maybe we can get that kid some early intervention. There are early interventionists right there on the ground. And without them, kids don't get diagnosed as early as they should, and they don't receive those therapies as early as possible, which we know makes a huge difference in their lives as they go forward. So we can start out at early ed and then go into high quality teachers. One of the things that I like to talk about with Leandro is professional development. How amazing would it be if not just we had more warm bodies in our buildings watching over our students, but they were highly trained and understood our students with disabilities, our students who are Black and brown, who are speaking other languages. This is the hope of Leandro that I think we should all also grasp onto. Disability is inclusive and intersectional. So whenever someone talks about Black and brown students, rural students or urban students, economically disadvantaged students, you're also talking about our disability students who are in every aspect of our society. And some of our disability students also have physical and neurological and mental issues all in one. And so we have to remember that they are human, first and foremost, not superhuman, not subhuman, but human. And it is our job as North Carolinians to take care of our children. And we're not doing that yet. There is an article that just came out in August from Charlotte, and the headline read, "We're telling students we don't want you here. NC leads nation in suspending students with disabilities." That's not a headline I want to hear, but I think the fact that they were using data from 2019 to 2020 was eye-opening, because inside that data was my own son. And so when we see data and statistics, when we talk about these numbers, I want you to picture real children who are having these things happen to them, suspended. And if you are Black and brown and disabled, you are more likely to be suspended than any other child in this state right now. And we need all of those resources that Leandro provides: school psychologists, school counselors, nurses for those who have physical things that need taken care of. All of these things lead to better outcomes for our students. And I'm not talking jobs, I'm not talking college, I'm just talking about taking care of children the way they should be taken care of. So I want you to think about Leandro as hope. Leandro as a way out. And sometimes what we all need to do is just believe that this can happen. Because when we don't believe, when we see words like supermajority, when we see words like, bad voting, laws, we all kind of cling to despair. And I am here to tell you today to not cling to despair, but to cling to hope and belief, because we can make this happen. I am a mom who was jobless. And look, this is what I'm doing now, because I believe in Leandro. I believe in all of you out there. And I believe in all of our panelists and every child that we can work together and get this done.
Leandro is hope. That'll sell. That'll sell. I like that. That you've been working real close with Attorney Thompson there. Sean, take us down east. Let us know what folks in the southeastern part of the state are thinking in regards to Leandro, the birthplace of the initial lawsuit. And then we're literally going to go a little bit further over, closer to the original Hope County, to Robeson County, and have Attorney Thompson you gave us 3 words last time to start us off at the end in 2022. We need 3 words for 2023. So after Sean, I'm going to toss it to you to close us out before we get into our question.
I cannot take too much space. I'm so inspired by what's been said, and so inspired by the fight for my neighbors in Robeson. I'm not only going to take a few minutes, but when I think of this fight, Mr. Thompson, or Attorney Thompson, I think of the quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." We've heard multiple times that this is the right thing to do, that equitably funding our education system, especially in these tier 1 rural counties like Cumberland, like Robeson, like Halifax. We know what the right thing to do is. We know we've been denied justice. I want to raise the point that this is not a new enemy. We've been fighting this sort of oppression since colonial times. This mindset that education is not something that should be for everybody, that it's for folks that can afford private tutoring in a plantation-style society. Well, we know that's something, a relic that we have to leave in the past. We know that we have to continue fighting for racial equity, for justice in our school systems throughout our state. And we know it's the right thing to do. I'm confident, just with the warriors that are on this call, with folks like Mr. Thompson continuing to lead the way, that we're going to reach that goal. And just speaking from Cumberland County, where we have a poverty rate that's 21%. It's about 20% higher than North Carolina, about 20% higher than the national rate. The symptoms of that are all over the place, from crime to our school systems. And our school systems are on the front line of protecting the folks that need the most shielding from that poverty, our children. And teachers and educators and social workers are doing the work that should be equitably funded and should be fully funded. And I believe Leandro gets us there. With that, I just wanted to give the mic to Mr. Thompson, let you close us out, sir.
Thank you. I just want to say that, we should let everybody know that everybody has skin in this game. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're black or brown, or any other shade in between, whether you're disabled, gifted and talented, we all have skin in the game. You know, metaphorically speaking, you all, this is climate change, and it's man-made. And as we are in the hurricane season, I look at all the storms and the weather that some of which we've never seen before. But it's been here, but it's just not it's not been as dramatic as it is now. But I believe in hope, and I'm a person of faith. And you mentioned that you wanted me to give you 3 words for 2024, 23, 24. It's the same 3 words that we've had all our life. And that's, look, we got to protest, we've got to pray, and we've got to vote. It never changes. We have to protest, and we have to pray for those who know the words of prayer. And we've got to vote.
Yes,
and
sir.
we're gonna win. We're
Yes,
gonna
sir.
win. And I'm not a preacher, but I can tell you, I've read the story. And when Pharaoh's heart is hardened, his army drowns in the Red Sea. And we need to tell that story. We're gonna win. We've won over and over again, but the fight continues. And I'm not at all. I'm disappointed, but I'm not at all dismayed by the kind of shenanigans that we see over there in the General Assembly. But metaphorically speaking, you all, this is climate change, and we're in very, very a climate that's man-made, but we can change it. And in order to change it, we've got to get out there and we've got to keep fighting. But remember, Pharaoh's army always drowns in the Red Sea.
Yes,
when
sir.
his heart is hardened. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Protest, pray, vote. I love it.
That's right.
And I tell you what, the chat is almost like our 6 panelists. The way that the chat is blowing up, the information that we're receiving, it is magical. I really appreciate this. We have one question that we have time for, and this came in our Q&A, and it is for Attorney Hinojosa. The question is, can you ask David about the latest attack against Justice Earls for naming bias and racism in our courts, and how that relates to their resistance in Leandro? I'm going to open it up first for David, and if anybody else here would care to expound, we can have this question out. And I'm going to drop the other question in the chat, and hopefully one of our panelists or some of our panelists can answer that one as well.
Yeah, and I was just apprised of this yesterday. I didn't even know this was going on in North Carolina. And it's shocking, but it's not shocking. And it's disturbing that it's not shocking, right? You know, I mean, judges, like other people, have free speech rights, and they can call it like it is. And trying to suggest that efforts in the Supreme Court to suppress anti-bias training and the like, as though those are somehow anti-ethical. So it's incredibly disturbing again, but it's not shocking, right? We saw this in Tennessee with the 2 young Black legislators, right? Powerful Black people are always a threat to white supremacists. And, we're going to be circling here at the Lawyers Committee to see what we might be able to do to support, but definitely, with Matt and so many others there in North Carolina, we're happy to support in any other way that we can, but it is yet another affront by a southern state, by a judiciary, by a legislature, by the commissions that have no checks and balances. All they do is have alliances. And again, you know, we're here to, you know, support you however we can in this. And whether or not this is, you know, an underhanded attempt at getting at Leandro, they have the votes already with or without, you know, Justice Earls. But Justice Earls is a powerful voice. She's a powerful Black judge with a great mind and a great heart. And unfortunately, that's a threat, you know, no matter whether or not, you know, Leandro is at stake here, in my opinion.
I think that statement, David, is going to have to do for us. We're at 7:02, and I want to make good on our promise. There's some things that you can do. Folks that are still on, 53 people are still on. It's not over to the benediction. That's what we were taught in Sampson County. We have so much more of this fight left. Everybody's been talking about the election. There's a municipal election right around the corner. You cannot play if you have not practiced, right, Sean? Right, Frenchie? We got to start practicing. 2024 is the practice round. Let's get out here. Let's make Leandro a municipal issue. Then in 2024, let's make it a presidential issue, a gubernatorial issue, a legislative issue. Let us not rest on our laurels. Let's keep spreading the word. Let's keep getting our individual petitions signed by these different school districts. Sarah is dropping links in the chat. There is still time for us to fight. Hope is not lost. And if we give up ground now, we'll be that much further behind than we were if we would have kept fighting. They would not be fighting so hard. They would not be trying to get Justice Earls out of office. They would not be trying to change the Judicial Standards Commission. They would not be trying to take over the Board of Governors. They would not be trying to take over the State Board of Education. They would not be trying to strip power from the governor of North Carolina. They would not be trying to gerrymander districts if they didn't believe that we are more powerful than what they're doing in the General Assembly. We just got to stand up. We got to fight back. We got to protest, right, Brother Thompson? What's the last two?
Protest. We got to pray.
You got to pray.
And you sure got to vote.
And you sure got to vote. And I hope, most importantly, we stay together. I hope you all get some rest. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I'm sorry. I wish we had 5 hours, and maybe one day we'll be in person and do this just like we were in Raleigh earlier this summer. But thank you so much. Thank you to Sarah, the Justice Center, to the whole team, Matt, everybody's helped put this together, Chris, and we'll see you all on the other side of this fight. Enjoy your weekend, the rest of your week, and enjoy your weekend.